The house is black and cold when Hester wakes first, as she always does. 68 winters have worn the habit into her. She no longer needs a rooster to tell her the hour. She swings her legs over the edge of the box bed, feels for her shawl in the dark, and pads barefoot across floorboards that creak in the same. 3 places they always have. The hearth holds only embers now, banked the night before under a blanket of ash so they'd survive till morning. Hester kneels, blows gently, feeds in a handful of dry kindling, birch curls, a twist of straw, and waits. The flame catches slow, then all at once, throwing orange, light across the low beams and the sleeping shapes, still curled under blankets on the floor above. By the time Thomas comes down, the kettle is already breathing steam, and the room smells of wood smoke and last night's stew reheating in the pot. He splashes his face with water from the basin, icy, drawn from the well the evening before, and pulls on his working coat, patched at both elbows. There is no clock in this house. The day is measured by light, by chores, by the sound of the cattle lowing in the byre, hungry and impatient. Margaret rises next, and together she and Hester begin the morning's real labor, raking the fire to full life, setting the porridge pot, checking the bread dough that's been proving under a cloth since last night. Nothing is wasted here, not time, not fuel, not food. A single candle burns near the window, its light rationed for the darkest. Half-hour before the sky outside turns from black to the gray-blue of a winter dawn. Outside, Thomas crosses the yard with a lantern, his breath clouding in front of him. The animals must be fed before the family eats. This is the order of things, unquestioned, inherited. In the byre, the cow shifts and huffs. In the coop, the hens complain softly at being disturbed. He works by feel more than by sight. Hands finding the latch, the bucket, the familiar shape of the pitchfork worn smooth by his father's grip before his. Will is the last to rise, roused by his mother's hand on his shoulder, and the smell of porridge finally thickening on the fire. He dresses quickly in the cold, lacing his boots by the hearth's glow, already thinking of the wood that needs splitting before he can eat. There is a particular quiet to this hour. No voices raised, no arguments, just the low functional sounds of a household turning itself over from sleep to work. One small task at a time, the way it has every morning for as long as anyone in the house can remember. Breakfast is porridge, sweetened with a spoon of honey when there is any to spare, and thick slices of yesterday's bread toasted at the fire's edge. The family eats standing or seated on stools, pulled close to the hearth. There is no formal dining here, no ceremony, just the practical business of filling stomachs before the real work of the day begins. Alice, 6 years old, is given her first task of the morning, scattering feed for the hens and gathering whatever eggs they've laid overnight. She takes this seriously, cupping each warm egg in both hands as though it might shatter from carelessness, carrying them back to the house in the fold of her apron. Margaret watches from the doorway, calling instructions when the girl strays too near the pig's pen, laughing when Alice yelps at a hen that pecks too close to her ankle. Thomas and Will head out to the fields with tools over their shoulders, a scythe, a hoe, depending on the season's demands. If it is harvest time, the work will stretch the length of daylight, backs bent under the sun, the rhythm of cutting and gathering as steady as breathing. If it is planting season, the soil must be turned and seeded before the weather shifts against them. The work does not wait for willingness. It waits for nothing at all. Margaret's morning belongs to the house, and it's endless. Small demands, mending a torn shirt by the window's best light, checking the milk that's been left to separate since yesterday, deciding whether today is a washing day or a baking day, since rarely can both happen at once. Hester, her hands slower now but no less capable, takes over Alice's early lessons. How to spin wool into thread on the wheel by the window, how to identify which herbs hanging from the rafters are for cooking and which are for the small ailments that visit. Every household, fevers, coughs, the ordinary suffering of rural life without a doctor nearby. By mid-morning, a neighbor's boy might pass the gate with news, or a peddler's cart might creak along the lane, and for a few minutes, the household pauses to listen to what's happening beyond their own fences. A wedding announced in the next parish, a poor harvest reported 3 farms over, prices at last week's market. Then, the moment passes, and everyone returns to what their hands were doing, because the sun has already climbed higher, and there is no morning to spare. The sun sits highest now, and with it comes the one true pause of the day. Dinner, the main meal, eaten at midday rather than evening, is bread, cheese, whatever vegetables the garden has yielded, and on a fortunate day, a bit of salted pork. The family gathers again, this time with genuine hunger, the morning's labor written, plainly on Thomas and Will's sweat-dampened, shirts and sun-reddened necks. Conversation at this meal is sparser than at breakfast. There is more. Tiredness in the body by now, and the afternoon still waits. Thomas might mention how far the field work has come, whether the weather looks set to hold, whether the fence on the north side needs mending before the sheep find the gap. Margaret listens and adds her own tally of the day's needs. The salt is running low. The washing must happen before the week is out. Alice's shoes are nearly through at the sole. After the meal, there is sometimes a rare stillness. Hester dozing briefly in her chair by the cooling hearth. Alice playing quietly with a corn-husk doll on the floor, the men resting their backs against the outside wall in whatever sun the season allows, saying little, simply recovering strength before returning to the fields. This quiet does not last long. It is a pause, not a rest, and everyone in the household understands the difference. If it is a market day, this is when Thomas or Margaret might walk the mile or two into the nearest village. A basket of eggs or a bundle of thread-spun wool traded for salt, needles or the odd small luxury and a twist of tea, a length of ribbon for Alice. These trips are infrequent enough to carry weight. News travels on market day faster than any other, and neighbors exchange more than goods across the stalls. Marriages, deaths, disputes over land, all passed hand to hand like the coins themselves. By early afternoon, the household turns again. Thomas and Will return to whatever the land demands of them. Margaret takes up the washing or the churn. Even Alice, midday nap finished, is set back to some small task. Untangling wool, minding the fire, watching for her mother's call. The day's second half begins the way its first half ended, with work, unhurried but unceasing, carrying the family toward evening one ordinary task at a time. The afternoon belongs to whatever the season has not yet demanded. In autumn, it is the harvest still, sheaves bound and stacked, the threshing floor swept clean for the grain still to come. In winter, it might be indoor work instead. Mending tools, carding wool by the fire, Thomas working at his joiner's bench on a stool or cradle. Promised to a neighbor in exchange for a favor owed. Will, old enough now to be trusted with more than errands, splits the wood pile for the evening fire. The rhythmic thud of the axe marking time across the yard. His arms ache by the 20th log, but he does not stop. Thomas taught him early that a fire not laid in daylight is a fire cursed after dark, fumbled for by cold hands in worse cold. Alice, meanwhile, has been sent to gather what the hedgerows offer this time of year. Blackberries in late summer, kindling twigs in winter, whatever small contribution a child her age can usefully make. Margaret's afternoon shifts toward the tasks. That cannot happen in the busier morning hours. This might be the day. The laundry finally gets done. Sheets and shirts scrubbed against a washboard and wrung by hand. Hung to dry across branches or draped over the low garden fence if the weather allows. Or it might be a baking day. The whole house filling with the smell of bread, as the fire is built up hot enough for the oven. Built into the hearth's side. Hester's hands, though slower, are never idle. This is often when she takes up her needle properly, mending torn hems, patching Thomas's work coat where the elbow has worn through again, or simply sitting with Alice and teaching her the stitches. A girl will need for her whole life ahead. Hemming, darning, the small, careful work, expected of every woman in this household and every household like it. As the light begins its slow decline, the sun dipping lower, shadows stretching long across the yard, there's a shift in the household's rhythm. Everyone begins without needing to be told. To think toward the evening. The animals must be fed and secured before dark, the fire built up properly, water carried in enough quantity to last until morning. The afternoon does not end so much as it folds itself, quietly, into the work of preparing for night. Supper is lighter than the midday meal. Bread, perhaps a thin soup made from whatever the day's cooking left behind, eaten as the last daylight fades from the windows. The candles are lit sparingly now, one or two at most, their small flames doing what work they can against the growing dark. This is the hour the household finally slows in earnest, the day's obligations mostly discharged. Thomas takes down his fiddle from its place above the mantel, an old instrument, inherited, its varnish worn pale, where his father's hand once rested and his own hand rests now. He tunes it briefly, then begins to play something simple and familiar, a tune Alice has heard every evening of her short life and already knows by heart. She claps along, delighted, while Will, feeling both too old and not old enough for such open joy, still can't help the small dance step he breaks into near the fire, half embarrassed, wholly happy. Margaret sits near the hearth with her mending basket. Though her hands move slower now, more out of habit than urgency, the day's real work is done, and this last task is company as much as labor. Hester rests in her chair, a basket of clean linens folded in her lap, watching the scene before her with the particular contentment of someone who has seen this same evening play out, in one form or another, for more years than she can easily count. The fire is the center of everything now, not just for warmth, but for light, for gathering, for the simple fact that this is where a family becomes visible to itself at the end of a long day. There is little talk of tomorrow's tasks tonight. That conversation belongs to the morning. Tonight is for music, for the low comfort of being warm and fed and together, for Alice's yawns growing longer and more frequent until Margaret finally lifts her toward the stairs. Before the last candle is snuffed, Hester banks the fire one final time. The same careful ritual that began the day, embers covered gently in ash to keep a spark alive until morning. The house settles into darkness one room at a time, the fiddle returned to its place above the mantel, the door checked and latched against the night. Outside, the fields lie quiet under a sky thick with stars, waiting, as they always do, for the household to wake and begin again.